Well, that happened. Greetings and welcome to the BlastCast. I am Jarrus, and with me as always is the man who sets up mines right in your living room, Lightning Dragon. It's been a little while since we've done one of these. There hasn't been a lot of news. It's been a massive drought. I mean, heck, last week's show was about Q&A. Now, I actually didn't mind the show. A lot of people weren't too happy with it. In fact, it kind of got ratioed, but I don't know. I think those guys do some serious hard work, and it's good to give them some recognition, and I had no real issue with it. Still, a little information on upcoming mechanics or ships would have been nice. So of course CIG revealed their new Nautilus, their mine layer. And the forum boards have kind of been torn between loving it and absolutely hating it, which is pretty common in Star Citizen community. But I think a lot of this comes from the perspective of how this ship can be used. And I think if you're looking at it as an offensive ship, you're going to be disappointed. And if you're looking at it as a defensive ship, you can still be disappointed if you don't apply it right. And for those who are looking at it in a particular way, it actually seems to be kind of a gold mine. So let's go ahead and get into the mechanics of mines in space and what my thoughts are on this ship and how it can best be utilized. Now, obviously space is big. I mean, you don't have to quote the Hitchhiker's Guide thing here, but you get the general idea. And just dropping 24 mines out in the middle of space isn't going to do much for you. A ship like the Nautilus is really something that's built to be a defensive ship. And as we've talked about before, when it comes to fighter combat and such in space, most of the times that you're going to find fighters to be useful is going to be at choke points. Well, the same thing's going to happen here. One of the things I was talking about with Lightning Hero is an Orion. And we talk about often going out and mining. And I got to the discussion with him that since it comes with an option, one of the two options is besides these explosive mines are turret mines, is that you could set up a defensive perimeter of turret mines around a group of ships who are actually mining a large asteroid to give them additional protection and cover. That's one example of what I'm talking about, of using mines at choke points.
They'd be kind of like area denial, just like fighters are. You're not really, you can't cover everywhere at once forever. Fighters are more mobile, so they can kind of go to places, where mines are, someone's going to come here, even if they're machine gun mines, right? It's more of you're setting up because you're expecting trouble in that area.
Right. And as they're looking at like player bases potentially coming online, where players can rent or own stations, and or like, for example, you go out in deep space, you are a salvager, you find a nice salvage, you contact your guild, say, hey, look, let's get a claim on this and let's mine this thing so no one can come in and steal our loot when you're out and away from it until you can get back to it. So it can also be a denial in that regards of kind of like laying claim to a certain small section of space. And obviously you could have multiple mine layers or maybe make multiple trips and place them out there. The real question I have is, when we do like persistence in Star Citizen, that's something it's been a real issue. Those mines disappearing, not being kept track of. And that's where the ship would fall apart. And obviously, you could mine things like jump points, but to some degree, we talked about the sharding and how if there's too many people in an instance, it'll create another layer and people can kind of blow past it. So I don't see this being a viable tactic, mining a jump point, at least at a busy sector, or even at all at... it's going to be something you want to use more away and more remote, where it's not going to spool up multiple instances of the same area. Now, personally speaking, I have always loved mine gameplay. One of my favorite examples is Mech Commander. Back in the day, it was kind of a 3/4 isometric over-the-top BattleTech game, kind of an RTS, and you would control just a few mechs. This was back during the days of DSL, maybe even dial-up. I can't remember. It was a long time ago. And it was a 3-on-3 competition. Two of my teammates either quit or disconnected because the internet wasn't as stable back then, leaving it as basically a 3-on-1 competition. Now, what I had done is I had chosen one large mech and 2 mine layers. And for an hour and a half, 2 hours, I completely and totally just kept these guys at bay by using the mine layer to go ahead and strategically keep them from coming in and also escaping, because since the game had fog of war, it worked really well for that. And eventually they did take me out when my station ran out of repair parts, but I had them down to, I had one guy completely dead, and the remaining 2 guys each had 1 mech that were severely damaged. So just with a couple mine layers and 1 mech, I was able to deal with 3 people on an opposing team. Mines are extremely strategic items. They're always defensive, no matter what. Even if you're thinking of them as an offensive capability, like say putting in front of a jump point for some reason, it's still a defensive thing. It's a denial system, and you have to always look at mines as a denial system.
Another thing to mention is a lot of video games, real life, minefields in general are almost always in a 2D dimension. Basically, it's length and width. So you want to look at minefields in World War I or whatever. Eventually you'd figure out, okay, well, how wide is the minefield? All right, it's this wide by this wide, and then basically it's like, okay, just don't go in here. It's a minefield. And if you want to go with naval mines, the ocean is a pretty big place, and even if you put like 100,000 mines in the ocean, it has to be a pretty dense area for a ship passing by to hit them. So like when Jarvis was talking about in the Mech Commander game, that worked very well because it's a 2-dimensional game. When you add a 3rd dimension, height basically in this case, and effectively infinite height, infinite width, and infinite length, 24 mines really isn't going to do anything. You're not going to stop someone from getting into a place, which is kind of going back to the situational side of things, area denial.
Now, some people in the forums have been talking about how they would like to see, since I think the explosive mines are size 7, they would like to see the 24 size 7s be able to swap out for, say, I don't know, 120 size 3s, or just throwing out a number. And I could see CIG maybe doing something like that down the road. As you go to a station, you swap out the parts, you have alternate carrying capabilities. Maybe not something you can do in deep space, but it is something that it has a lot of potential in the regards that not only could the ship lay mines, but different types of mines. Maybe you could have Lightning's favorite, you could have EMP mines. Maybe you could have just drop sensor buoys, because you have those missions out there where you have sensor buoys. Maybe that's the ship that's deploying them. Maybe you have scrambling buoys out there that go ahead and block transmissions in an area. Or like in Firefly, the Crybaby, right? You could have just decoys. You drop decoys around, distribute them out, and they can be activated as needed to kind of throw people off.
You could also do something like sonar buoys.
Yeah.
They're picking up comms chatter or whatever silently.
Exactly. There's a lot of different things that can be dropped other than mines, and really it comes down to what CIG can imagine that they could use this for. Now, some people said, yeah, why not just open up the side of a caterpillar and just throw stuff out the side of that? Yeah, I can technically see that kind of working, but the difference is that when you're carrying explosive ordnance, I think it might be better to carry that in a heavily armed and armored ship than something by Drake. That's just my opinion, though.
One of the things we were talking about was on the concept of variance, because of like the different sizes. And one of the things I brought up is torpedoes, because torpedoes are a better example to compare this to. In World War II, there was several different sizes of torpedoes. Either they had a larger explosive package or they were further range. But just because one of the ships could carry, a 533 or a 600 millimeter torpedo, and it could carry, let's say, 10 of them, that doesn't mean that it could carry like 20 like 250 millimeter torpedoes. That's not how it worked. So you can't just be like, oh well, I just want to have 200 size 1 mines, because the ships are not made to do that. So one of the things they could have is variants.
Hopefully not. You hopefully don't mean buying a whole new ship, but you mean like BUKs where you swap out a piece.
But one of the things with if you had a variant system, is you'd have like let's say you carry 10% more, but of a smaller size category. Or you have less of the large ones, but you have an area for some smaller ones. So let's say you have half as many of the large mines, but now you can carry like 20 smaller mines or sensor buoys or anything that fits into that kind of category.
You mean like modifications where you're able to mix and match a little bit, but it's actually it's a firm piece of equipment. It's not like you can just swap it on the fly. You go in saying I'm going to have a mix, but it's a piece of equipment that carries X of this and Y of this.
It'd be like completely reorganizing the internals of the ship.
Right.
Because it's not like, oh, well, we have this brand new torpedo launcher. Let's retrofit it onto our old ships. Well, that's great, but maybe you can't do it because it's too big. So you can't retrofit it.
Yeah.
So the idea here would be is you have certain internal cargo or mechanisms for launching these, such as like depth charges, right? You had to have certain mechanisms to launch those. You couldn't just throw them on. You had to put all the machinery, the storage, and all that. So you'd have variants that are set up to do X and Y or B and W or something, and then you could fit them based on the max and min size of whatever these mines or drones are.
And they talked about how the ship can actually send out its own drones to recover mines or disarm them or bring them back, which also gives it another purpose besides just being a mine layer, giving it the ability to disarm a minefield. Now, back to what you were just talking about, like where they retool, the ability to swap out to maybe, this is, of course, this isn't in the game, but if they were to do that, then you would run across the problem, of course, in that circumstance where you may not be able to bring them back into store because you don't have the proper components or the proper size rigging. I don't know. It's going to be interesting. I'm curious to see exactly how this is going to work, especially the disarming part. I also thought it was kind of funny, by the way, that a mine ship that's going to be sending drones in to deal with mines or disable the cockpit's like right in the front where it would get smacked by mines first.
Yeah. As always, CIG and their cockpit placements are like, wouldn't it be awesome if the cockpit was here? And it's like, wouldn't it be awesome if the cockpit was like in the center of the ship, or maybe on the top, in the middle? I mean, it doesn't have to be on the front of everything. When you first linked me that picture, I thought it was a fighter. I'm not gonna lie, it looked like a fighter.
I do like the way it looks, but the thing that caught my attention to it though was the idea that, if you're going to be disarming mines and your cockpit's in the front of the ship. Because, you think like, you go back to like real world, mine disposal units. Typically there's like a big armored plate in the front, and then you've got like the guy sitting like way behind that, So I'm thinking to myself, the cockpit should have been maybe back towards it's like, you see like ships like the Idris and other things like that. And the cockpit's in the back, right? It's on top, it's in the back. And I'm thinking to myself, this is one of the first ships that would truly want to have that or need to have that. And it doesn't have it. So I was thinking to myself, that was kind of an odd cosmetic choice. I still like the way the ship looks. It's just...
Again, it's a ship designed by designers. It looks cool, right? I'm not going to say it doesn't, but a military personnel person would tear that to pieces as far as design concepts go.
Yeah, suspension of disbelief. But it does look cool. I have to say I really do like the design overall. And and the thing too is that the reason we're not talking about the ship stats, what the guns are and what the and the missile turrets and things like that, is that all this stuff gets subject to change all the time. I always look at ships as roles, what they bring to the table or what they could potentially bring to the table. Because as much as they've told us right now about the gameplay for this kind of ship, as you know, as we get further along in development, someone's going to go, this could also do this. And then you'll end up with an enhancement or a change. Weapon sizes can go up, they can go down. Even the ship size in and of itself, by the time they get done building it, maybe like 80, 90 meters longer. I mean, you don't know. So I'm not too worried about the hard stats. That stuff in the air. But the roles. That's what every ship that I have has been selected for a role. And every time a change comes out, for the better or worse, I don't celebrate nor do I panic about it, because more changes will come.
Because I love comparing things to real world. In the real world, you often don't have... Well, it's not 100% true. Well, in World War II, because that's kind of the era everything is stemming from. Is usually if you had a ship that did one thing, that's all it did. So like mine disposal ships, they didn't carry mines with them because they're there to disable the mines. So you're getting a ship that's kind of a multi-function when in reality you probably wouldn't want that. Like the ship is probably twice as big as it needs to be because it's multi-purpose. So I mean when you specialize things, you're laser focused on what you want them to do, and then you usually end up with something that's better. It does mean in a video game sense that it's not as good unless you really want to be disposing of mines. So in that regard, I can be like, yeah, okay, it makes sense, right?
They're getting kind of pressed for time too, to some regards, with Squadron 42, and I know this ship has been brought out to the forefront because it probably is in Squadron 42. Maybe it's a defense mission, like, hey, protect these mine layers as a
we love escort missions.
Yeah, or maybe you're protecting as it's disarming or whatever. Developing two different ships that do functionally roles interacting with mines probably would have been too much more time than they would be willing to or be able to spend in development. And frankly, I don't mind the ship that has at least two functions, because there are a lot of ships that they're one and done, and modularity and that was kind of a big deal for backers, where we won't have modularity to the extent that we hoped for. Any ability to swap out tasks or things we can do within those tasks, I think most backers would find to be welcome. So kind of in summary, I like the ship. I think it's got potential. But I'm curious to know what you guys think about it. I mean, do you think it's a stupid idea to have a mine layer in space? Do you kind of see what we're talking about, where you would use it as purely a tool of defense, or like laying stake to something you found? How do you feel about anything about the ship, the pricing, the design? Let us know. I'm curious. I really want to know, because this ship seems to be one of those ships that people either love or hate, and I want to understand what it is about the ship that appeals to you or drives you insane. All right, everyone. Well, as always, leave your comments and suggestions down below, and we will catch you in the next one, whenever that is, because the news cycle is painfully slow, and we really don't like making BlastCasts unless we feel there's something to say. And as tired as we both are, we hope we said it somewhat coherently. Catch you in the next one.
Bye-bye.